Alrighty, Bowhunters, welcome back to another episode. Sitting here online with Jamie Macintosh and Hayden Rylewski.
Yeah.
I got there. Sorry, dude.
That's all right. It's not.
Interesting little story as to why this has come about, and I'm pretty excited for it because this gets into the weeds of fine tuning and getting your bow set up correctly and your arrows really firing in the best way possible. But essentially, what happened is right now, Eastern is conducting a massive arrow study, and they've been at it for a few months. And I found out along the chain somehow that you guys were actually doing the sound element to it. So going through and figuring out the noise components based on vanes, based on arrow builds, based on broadheads, based on pretty much everything you can do with an arrow is my understanding. And what I wanted to do is really just dive into everything that you guys got to, how it came about. I think like any little insights that we can really give to the audience that would help them with what we're talking about here, really, as it relates to hunters, is it's the difference between a deer ducking your arrow or not, really. Like the minuscule amounts comes down to that, probably based on the noise that an arrow will produce when it's flying through the air, which is pretty crazy to also listen to based on the stuff that you guys have put out already just on social media. But how did it originally come about? I don't know who wants to kick it off. Maybe Jamie, if you want to kick off like Jamie, the story as to how you even got involved with this and what that process looked like.
Yeah. So I actually started investigating the relationship between an arrow in flight and a bow, all the sound components, like probably a year ago, I started that process. And I'd just been like tinkering around myself because my background's in audio and acoustics. And I was listening to a podcast with John Dudley and Yates, and they announced this study. And in it, he mentioned that they had actually set up like a decibel meter downrange to try and record some audio stuff during their ballistics like analysis.
Yeah.
And they said that it didn't actually come off because like they were recording inside like a warehouse. And so there's too many acoustic reflections and they didn't get any good data. And I was thinking to myself, holy crap, I've literally built a purpose like designed chamber to measure arrows in flight. So I was like, I need to connect with these guys. So I sent him a message on Instagram and I was like, oh, cool study that you're doing, yada, yada, yada. And then I realized this bloke's he's never going to see my message. Like his DMs are probably blown up since like the release of this study. So I was like, oh, I need to cut through the chase. So I was like, oh. I sent him a graph and I said, I have sound data, just like a graph of all the Fletchers I'd like measured so far and some frequency analysis. And he got straight back and said, all right, let's tee up a meeting with Tristan from Precision Cut. And so that's how it started. And then they asked all the right questions about what affects sound, how do you measure it? Can you do a frequency analysis? Like all the different things in the sound world. And they asked the right questions. And so they were like, oh yeah, let's do a collab. So yeah, basically they did the drag and the fixed blade displacement sort of stuff. And they just actually shipped me a whole bunch of the arrows to do the sound testing here in Australia. And yeah, that's when
so they were already pre-fletched, pre-set up completely, like everything that they wanted tested essentially just got sent your way.
Exactly. So they just set a list of like, all right, here's all the arrows, like here's what we want tested. I had some like recommendations on doing speed stuff, and Hayden here can shoot both 70 pounds and 80 pounds. So I was like, all right, we've got some speed variation. Yeah. And so that's the way it panned out.
From the tuning side of things, Hayden, what did you have to change your bow at all for different shots or anything like that? Like for the different arrow weights?
No, not really. Just basically we had the arrows that were there and they're all pretty similar weight wise. And we just paper tuned everything it was actually one of my old bows because I was the correct draw length and correct poundage. And we got that all set up first. And then once we did that, I had my 80-pound bow there. We could shoot that through to see any differences. But it was just it's more of a matter of making sure that the bow is shooting correctly, because any kind of deviation is the arrow coming out of the bow obviously is going to put a lot more drag on the vanes. It's going to cause such a massive and dramatic noise variation in it. But yeah, we didn't really have to do too much to it. Just make sure the bow is properly tuned. And obviously then I could shoot relatively consistent with not torquing the bow too much and whatnot.
Yeah, interesting.
Hayden had to, in order to get good data, he had to shoot through a little window like this over and over again every time. And if he clicked, it was a string line basically. So if he clicked it, there'd be a little like puff of like chalk and I'd be like, mate, no one, that was a bit of pressure on him, but he delivered.
I think we had, what was it? Is it 36 different variations? So like vanes, helical, offset, and vane types obviously as well. And 4 Fletch and 3 Fletch. So We had to go through them, and I think we ended up shooting. Did we shoot each arrow 6 times each, Jamie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
6
it was a lot of,
shots each.
Yeah, wow.
yeah, 6 good shots. So there were a few towards the end of the day where the arm was getting sore, tagging the string line.
Did you do it all in one day?
No, did it. Yeah, 2 days. It was was it 3?
I can't remember, but it was after
A
work.
lot of
so I had
shots
to do
still.
work.
Yeah, 240 shots plus. Yeah.
Yeah. We only had a certain amount of time after work with the daylight as well. That was the issue because we'd
of course.
start shooting, then we'd run out of daylight because it was like 4 o'clock or whatever by the time I could get out to Jamie. And then the later it got, honestly, couldn't really see the target anymore. I just knew where to aim on the string line. I knew getting clearance.
So tell us about the chamber, the shot. So tell us first about the chamber that you built, Jamie, but then Hayden, tell us about the shot, like lengths and everything like that and what it actually looked like for you. Yeah, tell us about the chamber first, Jamie.
Yeah, so the one that we used was the 3rd iteration of a testing chamber that I built. The first couple ones, they were a bit small and we're getting some pressure fluctuations in it, which was distorting the measurement microphone that I had in there.
Yep.
So I just kept building them bigger and bigger. And it's inside. So I live on a farm and I built it inside a shed. So it's a full walk-in room and it's got a hole at either end for the arrow to fly through the building.
Yeah.
And then there's a fixed base measurement microphone position in the center so that the arrow will always pass exactly 1 meter away from the microphone. So it's like taking out all the variables that we can. The shell of the building itself is isolated from like birds and wind and just ambient noise.
Yep.
And then internally it's treated with like acoustic kind of foam, not foam, but acoustic insulation so that there's no echo inside the chamber. So it's basically taking out any variable that we can. So we're just measuring the sound of the arrow as it passes the microphone.
And so if you're sitting in that room, it's essentially like just a silent room. It's like
Silent.
It's not bringing in any extra external noises and everything. So it would do most people's head in if they had to sit in it.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
I was in there and Jamie was on the outside of the building and I was just like, yeah, just talk. And it was like he was an extra like 50 meters away. His voice just did not travel whatsoever. And it was just, weird being in there. Cool, but weird, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so you said the 3rd iteration was each time a smaller concept. You started small and then you had to go bigger.
Yeah, literally, because as the arrow was entering the chamber, it was actually pressurizing the air inside, which is created just momentarily as it enters through the openings and going out. And so it was messing with the microphone membrane. So yeah, it was.
So you were essentially getting an internal like a suck in, suck out or something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
and it was distorting the measurement. So I just needed to increase the volume until that didn't occur and the size of the opening. So it was a bit of trial and error, but got there in the end. And now that I've verified that it gives the same results as if you were measuring outside in free field on a real quiet day, we know that it doesn't actually add or manipulate the sound in any way. So we're just measuring the sound of the fletching.
And so something that Hayden talked to before, if the arrow wasn't shooting straight and it got some form of torque on it that would add noise, is that just essentially just adding more of like a whole sound? It's like a drag sound as it goes through the air?
Yeah, exactly. I found, when the bow isn't tuned and the arrow's fishtailing as it goes past the microphone, it increases in sound and it's unpredictable too. So it gives you massive spreads in the data. Whereas if it's shooting straight, you get a much tighter spread in sound level.
I mean, if that's not in itself a reason to go and get your bow tuned, right?
Exactly.
The fact that your broadheads don't shoot very well without it, but if you're fishtailing, if you see your arrow, when we say a fishtail, it kicks out to the side when you shoot. It's a big problem with your bow, so you need to get it tuned.
Yeah.
So take us through then what your actual shot process was like, Hayden. Like how long was the range? How big was the actual hole you're shooting through? We pointed it out roughly before, but giving a measurement, roughly 10 centimeters, 20 centimeters you had to shoot through?
Yeah, I think we're probably about 7 meters off the actual barn. So I was sitting down with Jamie next to me with all the equipment, 7 meters off the actual barn. Then we probably had, I guess you can say basketball hole, actual barn, but then he set up string lines that are basically just a square. I think it was about 75 mil, Jamie, or 100 mil.
Yeah, it's 50 mil because it means, the 50 mil means that if you're at the top, like if you shoot through the top of that window or the bottom, the spread in sound level difference at the microphone will be like less than a dB. So that was the reason it had to be that size. And that was, what we had to
I think we had the length of the chamber as well then. And then the other side as well, same setup, the circle with the string line again. So if I did, because obviously different weights and stuff, the arrow's going to shoot
Arc differently. Yeah.
Yeah, I could not nick the front one, but with the arc of a really heavy arrow, I might nick the back. So we need to be really cautious of that. So there was only a very, thin window to actually shoot through.
So were you having to aim slightly higher based on the different arrow weight then?
Yeah. So that was a bit of a learning curve as well. But most of the time it wasn't too bad. I realized like once we started shooting them all, I'd shoot the first one. And if I'd tag it, obviously I just aim it higher. But most of the time as well, I could just aim for the string line itself, like the top string line, because I started to lose light. So I was aiming for the top string line. And then by the time I actually got there to the actual first, it would duck through and it'd be fine after that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your string line? Just imagine a chalk line. Yeah. Cool.
Chalk line from
Build string line.
which was great because if you did hit it, you'd see the big puff and you're like, because you couldn't really tell if it's just a normal string line, but you hit the chalk line, the chalk would come off and you'd be like, all right, we're going to have to.
Good visual cue at least every time as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It was a great setup.
And so let's talk about then the arrow setups they actually sent you. You touched on a few different variations of what they were before. We had three vein versus 4 vein. You had larger helical versus lesser helical. What were the differences in those percentages for the helicals that they had?
So that they had straight fletch. They had 2 degrees was like the baseline for all the whole range of fletchings that they sent out. 2 degrees was the standard, but they sent a few at 0 degrees, and I think it was between 4 and 5 degrees, which is pretty a heavy helical. But for the most part, it was testing just a comparison of all the different veins fletched at 2 degrees. And then with some additional side ones of like, all right, how does helical affect it? How does adding a 4th vein affect it? Yeah, there's some pretty interesting findings in that.
About wraps versus no wraps. Anything there? No.
They didn't. No, that's the front profile. It's not going to be affected too much by it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something that they saw to investigate.
Yeah, cool. And so do you have the data essentially that we can go through? What's that look like?
Yeah. So the data is all on the Precision Cut website. So this study was between James Yates and Tristan from Precision Cut Archery. And he's posted all the data on his website. He's formatted some really lovely graphs that you can look at: aerodynamic drag, lift recovery, wind drift, and then also the sound stuff. And basically what it does, it informs you to make the decision about, okay, what are my priorities when I go hunting? Is it like, do I need a lot of, if I'm shooting a big fixed blade, do I need a lot of lift recovery? So then you'll choose the one at one end of the scale. Or are you shooting further? Are you more concerned about noise? Then you might pay more attention to the noise. And if you're shooting further and you're concerned about energy loss, let's say you're a low pounded shooter, then you might be more considerate of the drag. So there's those 3 aspects that you have to weigh up in terms of the vein profile that you choose. What veins are you guys using at the moment?
I use the easy veins, the 4-inch. I don't know. It's a round one essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I used to run the AE Max Stealth forever. Like I did love them, and it's one of my favorite veins of all time. But then I did switch over to the Easy Fletch. I was watching Liam Woods, actually. He put up a little story. I don't know how he filmed it, but he was shooting and he shot and hit a branch like on a pig, and hit the branch, and this arrow come out like it was horrendous, the kick it had, and this was an under 20-meter shot.
Straightened back up.
And it recovered straight up, and he pumped it, and that sort of sold me on. I was like, I wasn't too sure, and I was like, is this a real thing? Are these good? And yeah, I saw that happen. I switched over to it. And the other thing is I'm pretty lazy as well. I was getting Fletch and arrows all the time, man. It's just that easy. So I was like,
you and me both, brother.
Yeah, they work. That's definitive right there. And I was like, yeah, I'll go for this.
It was actually like literally the two same concepts as to what brought me across from 3 vein to 4 vein was the process of it being able to shoot through bushes and correct itself better, and just the fact that it would always correct itself faster. And then also I found it much quieter. I used to use like it was almost like a shield cut. And I actually noticed such a big difference going from the shield cut going to the easy veins, and the difference that it made in sound. You could hear the arrow, like just when you shoot it, you'd hear it take off, versus with the easy veins, you don't hear it. So
have you ever stood down range, like on an archery range, whenever you're on the left side and someone's shooting down past you and the arrows fly past your head?
Yeah.
Crazy. You can seriously tell the difference between whatever fletching they're using, but it's such a dramatic difference. And it just makes me think like, deer are so much more switched on.
Oh, 100%.
You can hear it like that. That's like a siren in their ear sort of thing.
Yeah. What maybe if we bring up the actual graphics. I'm going to bring that up on screen real quick.
You did a really good job of explaining it and putting it up.
Yeah, it's really clean and simple. It's
Sort of whole study to me has pushed. Obviously, tuning your bow is an extremely important thing, but arrow noise now has gone on my radar like to almost the forefront, because I think it's such a much more important thing that we put respect on in the past, as opposed to now. Like, we've got definitive scientific data to say, hey, this is a serious factor we need to think about.
Definitely. And you think about the Americans that are putting the money into this. I've been actually interviewing a lot more Americans recently. And one of the biggest things that stands out is like their hunting season is 1 month. They're out there. That's all they get to do. So it makes sense
Feels
that
bad.
it makes sense as to why they want to have everything so dialed in. And you would be so disappointed if your one opportunity came in and you lost it due to noise. Oh God, we're kicking the nuts.
fully.
That's like
and
where it's, oh, they jump the string, and it's always been, oh, they jump the string. It's not. It's the noise of the vane. It's just so.
that's what really set me off on this path that I've been on. Was there's so much speculation on forums and whatnot. This vene's louder than this vane, and are they hearing the bow? Are they hearing the sound of the arrow? So I was like, look, I can measure stuff.
do it.
Yeah, I've got good equipment, so let's get to the bottom of this. And yeah, that's basically what I've been working on for the past year behind the scenes.
If I bring up the data, is that helpful?
Yeah, it depends. It's very product specific. If it's probably better if people want to look up where their vane sits in the mix, they can go and look at it. But it's there's a lot there. So to talk about all of it, there's
Bit extreme. Yeah. Let's talk about the difference in helical straight away.
Sure. So yeah, we measured 0 degrees, 2 degrees, and 4 degrees. And what they found, from the sound perspective, what we found is that there is not a massive difference in noise going from 3 Fletch to 4 Fletch, but for drag and for lift recovery, it's more notable. So for drag, there's quite a substantial increase in drag going to a 4th vane, and that is not equal to how much lift recovery it adds. And lift recovery is basically just how well it corrects the arrow. So yeah, in a lot of respects, like when you listen to James Yates and they talk about the summary of all the study, it doesn't seem like a 4th vane is really worthwhile. You're almost better off going to a vane that has better lift recovery. It might be a taller, more surface area vane, rather than going to a 4 Fletch configuration.
That's interesting. So you didn't notice even on the taller framed vanes when there was 4 versus the 3 that it didn't really make that lift correction that much different at all.
Yeah, the negative effects of increasing drag were greater than the positive effects of lift recovery.
So what is the negative effect of the drag?
It just means your arrow decelerates quicker. You lose energy.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You've lost a few more feet per second than with an arrow that doesn't have as much drag.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. And this is something that because I've been talking to a lot of Americans recently about it. I really feel like there's a standard here in Australia to shoot 20 meters, 20, 30 meters. Yes, every once in a while, people are shooting longer shots. And it's not a bad thing. It's, hey, if you can do it, go for it. But as a concept, we typically have the opportunities to get much closer. So therefore, that is a key factor for those people who are looking to shoot maybe 50 to 70 yards. That would be a big factor of what you would actually want to pull into your concept of what you're doing versus where you're shooting 20 meters or less. It's kind of like neither here nor there. If you're getting the result that you want at the end of it with dead critters walking away, then you're good to go.
And the level of attention that I think you need to pay to this stuff is really dependent on how far if you're shooting 20 meters or less, vane noise doesn't really matter. They can hear the bow and the arrow basically the whole time.
Yeah.
So they're going to react even with the quietest fletching and broadhead combo. It's only when you start to get out past 30 meters that there is a time separation between the bow going off and then when they detect the arrow. So that's when it starts to pay to have a quiet broadhead, a quiet vane, and a knock that doesn't whistle. That's also another one that can.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so back to the helical then, there was no real difference in 0 versus 2 versus the 4 to 5%.
So I missed that.
That's right. In regards to the helical, of the vanes, what was the major difference between 0, 2, and 4 to 5?
It was mostly drag. Going to the extreme helical increases drag a lot.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, there didn't seem to be a huge benefit to going to 4 to 5 degrees. 2
And
degrees seemed to be plenty.
what about on the noise front? Did it drastically change it?
It was so we actually measured the effect of helical and change in velocity. So we measured it like 260 feet per second, 280 and 295 feet per second. And the results are pretty funky in a sense. It's not what we expected, because going to 4 to 5 degrees with a quick bow, the sound actually was less than some of the other results. Like you would expect it to be
Yeah,
more
louder.
helical,
Yeah.
loud, faster bow, it would get louder, but actually there's either there's something going on that I don't fully understand, or there's an anomaly in the
Yeah,
measurements.
I was just trying to think of like scientifically or like aerodynamically, how does that even work? Because even if you expect it spinning it faster, wouldn't that then create more noise still, you'd think?
You would think until it reaches its terminal spin velocity, and then you would imagine that the sound would even out.
So in regards to the setup that you guys had, shooting where you're essentially measuring, let's say between 8 and what was the length of the cabin? 5 meters, so 8 and 13 meters. How much do you think that would affect it compared to if you measured, let's say 30 to 40 meters or 30 to
That's
35 meters?
awesome question. Awesome question. That is something that I have definitely thought about, because you have the spin up of the arrow. So it's in those first 10 meters or so, it's reaching the speed, its maximum terminal spin rate.
Yeah.
And so where you measure it in that cycle is going to have an effect. I don't actually know if you like plotted the arrow noise as it travels, if it actually, there's an increase in sound as it has that additional drag when it's getting to spin. And then once it reaches its spin, if it drops off. I don't know that yet. That's something that I definitely is on the cards to
Still
measure.
to come. Yeah, how good. Okay, so helical does play an effect on drag, but not necessarily on noise, at least if you've got a faster bow.
It's negligible, really.
Something that pricked my ears up just before was the Nocks and the whistling knock. What was it to do with in regards to shape of the knock? Was it just certain types of knocks? Did you try lighted knocks versus plastic knocks versus other types? What happened?
Yep. So it was just something that I noticed. I was getting it was a particular frequency range, so a particular pitch area that was getting some between arrow setups. I was like, what is this being caused by? And then I was like, hold on. I changed the knocks between these two test setups, like just when I was measuring some different things. So I was like, all right, let's investigate knocks. So I shot bare shafts, no fletches on it, just a field point on the front. And I changed out the knocks. And what I found is that some of them whistle, some of them don't. And it just comes down to the geometry of the throat. And the scariest thing that I found was the nocturnal lighted knocks. I actually, to get some good data, I needed to measure in a place where it had really low ambient noise. So I packed up the car and I drove 15 hours west into the desert, where there's no ambient noise out there. There's no life. There's no bloody cars driving past. And I shot those lighted knocks from between 20 and 90 meters away from the target. And you can hear them whistling the entire time from 90 meters when it's really low ambient noise. So the actual knock you use can be like a vortex. Those like toys you used to play. It's like one of them.
And you also think about that frequency, and you think about a wild dog, for instance, and the frequencies they can hear that we can't, and the higher pitch that it gets. Imagine that it's a whistle literally coming through the air at them.
Literally. So it's definitely something that I'm going to try and get some more knocks to test. But I've tested the nocturnal lighted knocks, the blighter knocks, the key up, like Amazon lighted knocks, and most of them are fine. But occasionally there'll just be one that has a particular geometry that causes it to whistle. So I know it's something that you would never know this sort of stuff. Like how the hell are you supposed to?
Just lost Jamie. Hopefully he comes back.
Yeah, that's why I find this stuff so interesting, because there's
So
little
fascinating.
things like that you don't even think about or know about, and you just stumble upon. And it's, oh, that's something else. That's another door to look into. Because you could think in your head, oh, I've got the perfect setup, everything's great. What's going on? Like, why am I missing these shots? And then it's always, as an archer, you're always thinking, damn, I need to practice more. I pulled that shot. I did this. I did that. But realistically, you might have done everything right, but it's just you had a lighted knock on it.
Well, especially when you put it in a bow hunting scenario where you would probably think in those situations, you're like, it was the hunter's fault. Yeah, you probably just had buck fever. That's all it was. Versus in this situation, you're actually saying, oh, maybe not.
90 to 98% of the time when I'm hunting and I stuff it up, I think I stuff it up. I'm like, oh, it's me. I've moved.
You know it. You do know when you pull on the bow or do something.
Yeah, but then it is in your setup as well, and you try as much as you can. And when I first started like learning to tune bows and everything like that, I was more of a set and forget kind of guy. I was like, I'll just set it, forget it, don't worry about it. And the more I got into it, I was like, oh no, there actually are these factors that you really need to think of to have a really good tuned bow, because I need that bow to recover for me if I do make a mistake. And it's so easy to. We're not, as humans, yourself, we're not all like biomechanically. We're so different, and there's so many different factors going into a shot. We need that equipment to be spot on for us every single time.
Yeah, definitely. Jamie, are you back? Can you hear us? Still not.
He is literally in the middle of nowhere as well. So I'm thinking maybe
It's cut out.
he's gone. Yeah.
That's so wild that he just drove 15 hours to test some sound, though. That's
like, he was
awesome.
I don't know. Like when I got there, he's like, yeah, I tested this. Oh, these are the findings I've got. And I was like, oh, so you've been shooting through this for a while. I don't know. I went and he showed me on the map, like it's out near, like past Broome. Like it's out literally in the middle of freaking nowhere. And he's like, yeah, I just pulled up and started shooting.
That's wild.
He's a nerd about it, but it's great.
And you need someone like Jamie to put in the effort that he is doing to make it like, it all makes sense now for him to go ahead and do that process. That's so incredible.
It's like one of those things where usually there can be something so simple in life that you just don't think about until someone says it to you. They're like, oh, why not this? And you're like, that makes so much sense. And him doing like these little things, it's why didn't I even comprehend any of that?
Yeah, on a level of what the podcast is, I think that's what people really appreciated, especially in the early days, because I was brand new to it. I had no understanding. I was like, what about this? And they're like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Like, I hadn't thought of it that way. And then, it's just like a different view. It gives you a different perspective.
A non-biased, sort of clean, and a lot of people are scared to ask those quote unquote silly questions when you don't know until you ask the question. And different minds think differently. Like we could both be given a problem to solve. You'll find a completely different way that I'm going to find a way to complete it.
Yeah.
So you need that different aspect and that different thought to go, oh yeah, this is how I did it. Or this is what I'm thinking. This is a path I'm going to take. So I think it's great. Yeah.
It's also the concept of the body regenerates itself every 7 years. So every 7 years, you're a whole new self. So like literally your cells essentially, like they'll shed and they'll rebuild themselves, regenerate and whatever else. It's like a whole process of like autophagy, which is like the discarding of trash essentially, and then rebuilding. And I think I don't know the actual stats, but part of your body will like regenerate itself every week. The cells will completely start from scratch. It's so wild to think as a concept. Really? But then that's when they're like, you should go back and read a book again, for instance, when you're like every 7 years and see the new perspective you've got on it, see the new take that you take on it. Obviously, your whole perspective changes in general. It's not just because your cells are changing.
Yeah.
But as a concept, I think that's pretty wild.
That makes sense as well. Because obviously, going back and looking back, it's funny when like old Facebook posts pop up and stuff. And I'm like, why the hell did I post that? Or I said, like,
what was I thinking?
Mindset was like back then?
Exactly.
Like that makes a lot of sense that things change in like every 7 years because you just sort of grow and change. I thought it was just like a life thing where you grew, but that's funny. I never knew that.
What we might do is hit pause real quick and wait till Jamie just gets back in.
Easy.
All right. So before the little technical glitch, we essentially was just saying that the Nocks can have such an effective part. And what you found is, was it mainly just lighted Nocks, or will you find it on other types of Nocks as well?
It's not just isolated to lighted Nocks. It's just the geometry of the throat itself and how square it is. If it's got square edges, not many tapers, they can have a whistle. And so there's no way of predicting it really. I know it's not what you want to hear. But yeah.
So even within one brand, for instance, just if, for instance, in manufacturing, they have something go a little bit wrong on just one pack of them, you might not even know. It could be completely perfect on the test that you've done, but then you could just get a bad batch, is what you're saying there?
No, it's actually just the design of it.
Okay.
So they'll all whistle if it's designed in a particular way. So yeah, it's not, I don't like bashing brands.
No, definitely.
The nocturnal lighted Nock, it whistles like crazy. I wouldn't shoot it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's wild.
So the key up lighted Nocks, they don't whistle. The biter Nocks, they don't whistle. So yeah, I haven't tested all of them. That's just the ones I know so far.
There's legit. I used to work in an archery shop and there's legit the hundreds of them.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
It was so painful to try to figure it all out for different size arrows and whatnot. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to get around to shoot them all.
Yeah. So we talked about Helical. We talked about Nocks. What were the other things that you guys had to test? I know Broadhead was one. What other factors did you have within the testing?
So, well, the testing for Eastern, they didn't send me any broadheads. They did the drag and the lift recovery with broadheads, but we didn't actually test any. I've tested some broadheads on my own accord. Some, and it's on the results on my Instagram. There's just a lot of Cayugas in there, just what's available, what I had on hand.
Yep.
So I had about 11 different broadheads, some iron wheels, some QAD Exodus, bunch of Cayugas. And just measure them through that same process using the quietest vein that we found in the Eastern study as like a base level arrow. And all I did was just change the broadhead. So that way we know just the effect the broadhead is having on the sound.
Yep.
Yeah. So it turns out this is a little digress into the broadheads, but the Cayuga Trizot was the quietest in that
the quietest.
batch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just looking at the design, it's pretty easy to predict. You look at how long the leading edge is, if it's a really steep leading edge, and if it's a really steep trailing edge with no rounding or taper, then it's going to create a lot of turbulence and it's going to create noise. So yeah, you can pretty much look at a broadhead and go, oh, how square is it? Where are there sharp edges? And that can give you a really good indication.
So essentially what you were just saying there is the sharper and pointier it is, the less sound it's going to be versus the wider and more broad it is, the more sound it's going to be, essentially. Is that right?
Same for the front edge and the back edge. If it just ends in a flat, like the blades come to their sort of apex and then they just go flat, it's going to create turbulence in that space behind it. Whereas if they taper back into the shaft, they create a lot less drag and they create a lot less noise.
Yeah, got you.
Much difference with vented versus
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, the whistles or?
There's more air to circulate in through those vents, catch air and create more drag and more sound. Like the difference between a vented and a non-vented is massive. And then in the Eastern study, they also found that vented broadheads tend to just have a lot more drag, so they decelerate quicker downrange.
Makes sense.
In a lot of sense, non-vented is quieter, has less drag, and it may have even been more like they grouped better downrange, but you'd have to check that. Yeah.
What about like the Zot, for instance, how they've got like the aerodynamic lines through it? Does that have an effect on the sound as such, do you find, or is it helps with aerodynamics?
Yeah. So the fact they've put those little radius on the edge will absolutely make a difference in how much turbulence, how much sound it creates. If you had a Zot and it had all square edges, it's going to create a lot more noise than the current version that they have. Still, that being said, just vented broadheads are just louder than solid blade. Like no matter what you do to the edges, there's more air getting in and creating more drag. So yeah, the stuff the Cayuga has done with that Zot is I haven't seen anyone else do that extra attention to trying to make a vented broadhead quiet.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a function of drag. So yeah. Oh, is this the results you've got up?
This is actually, yeah. So essentially what you're saying inside of it, and when you did it, it sounded pretty much like most of them sound the same to the ear, but you're measuring the actual decibel that it's releasing each time. So
yeah, exactly.
To put that in layman's terms. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so decibels are a funny thing. It's not a linear scale. So when you imagine like a sound doubling in loudness, from a power perspective, it's 3 or 6 dB is actually doubling in power, but perceptually, a 10 decibel change is what we perceive as doubling or halving in power. And it's just because decibels is a logarithmic scale. So in order to do any calculations, you need to convert it back to its base sound pressure and then back to decibels. So if you imagine 50 dB plus 50 dB, you would imagine 100 dB, but it's not. It's actually 53 dB. So when you do these calculations and you look at decibels, a 3 dB change is actually a substantial change. A 10 decibel change is massive. That's like from a power perspective, it's huge, but perceptually, it's about double or half as loud. So that's why when you look at in that broadhead, those broadhead measurements, the values that you were getting was how much sound is being added to a field point. Those ones in the bottom in green were adding less than 3 dB. So there's no noticeable change for a human or most likely a deer between the field point and the broadhead. So those ones are the real quiet ones. Then there's a sort of middle of the road between sort of 3 and 9 dB, which you may hear a difference. And then more than 10 dB, you're going to hear a substantial difference between a field point and a broadhead.
So the ones in the reds are the ones that you're just saying, the 10. These are the orange ones, and then these are the ones that were not having much of a difference at all in your green.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're shooting less than 20 meters every time, you can shoot whatever you want. It's as you start to get out to distance, then it's best to pay attention to how loud your whole system is, both your broadhead, your fletching, and your knock. So it all adds up.
And it's so interesting what you were talking about in the sense of all tapered edges, all cutting edges, essentially. So it is actually very important to have the cutting edge on the back of your broadhead as well. And I never really put much thought into it. I was just like, oh, it makes it easy to pull out of an animal. And I thought that was the functionality of it, not the fact that, hey, it's actually way more aerodynamic and probably, and sounds better as well.
Totally.
Yeah, interesting. We actually did skip over we talked about helical, but we didn't really talk too much about the shapes and sizes of the actual veins and what you guys had access to and the differences that they made. That's obviously going to be a big part of the testing as well.
Yeah, for sure. What we did find in just the results for the noise in the veins is that same principle of how long that leading edge is and how much it tapers back into the shaft has the biggest impact on sound. So the two quietest ones in the tests were it's like a Q2i Griff X, which has a very gradual taper back to the back of the arrow, and then the Fletch F360, which again has like a little tab that tapers it back into the shaft.
So shape-wise, are they rounded? Are they triangle? What do they look like?
Very gradual shapes.
Yeah.
The ones that have steep edges and shield cuts are the loudest ones.
Yeah. Makes sense.
What's that one, Jamie, that you did? Remember how you said to me that there is a correlation between the height of the vein and the noise? And you actually did like a test of 10 or so, whatever it was. But one of the ones in there was a high profile vein, and it was one of the quietest ones there.
Yes. Yeah, that was the DCA Super Saber. So there's a really good pretty good correlation between how tall a vein is and how loud it is. And the taller the vein, the better it is for steering a broadhead. So if you want more steering, generally you have to accept more noise. But there was a vein that sort of bucks that trend, and it was a DCA Super Saber, and has a very interesting sort of double delta profile. It's got nice little rounded edges, and the stiffness of it as well is obviously having an effect, but it's very quiet for its height. So it's going to be good at steering fixed blades, but also without giving you that noise that would normally be associated with a higher drag, higher lift recovery vein.
Yeah, interesting. When you talk to stiffness, is it the stiffer they are, the more quiet they are?
No, it's what I found from a sound perspective is that the stiffer the vein, it'll actually have a resonance at very high frequencies. So you imagine the frequencies that we can hear, which is the bass frequencies going up to high sibilant sounds like a hi-hat or whatever. Then there's sounds that beyond what we can hear. And a deer has very sensitive hearing in those frequency ranges. So even though we might not hear the sound of an arrow because it's very loud in that range, a deer is likely to hear it.
Yeah.
So a stiff vein actually pushes that resonance to much higher frequencies outside our hearing range, but within the hearing range of deer. So there's a case to be made for those stiffer veins, even though they sound quieter to humans. For deer, they might sound quite a bit louder.
Yeah.
So yeah, if that all comes down to a frequency plot. If you can look at a frequency plot, you can look at human hearing ranges here, and then what sound is in this range into the ultrasonic frequencies. And if there's a vein that's really loud in that range, you're not going to hear it, but a deer most likely is.
Do we have much science around like deer hearing in that aspect and what they can actually get away with or hear? Yeah.
There's a few studies out there. The best one uses behavioral science test on deer hearing, and they basically had a deer drink from a water bowl, and they would play a sound and then straight after electrify the bowl, so that if the deer heard the sound, it would learn to stop drinking. Otherwise it would get shocked. Whereas if it didn't hear the sound, it would continue to drink, and then they would deduce that it can't hear that sound. So they would play different sounds of different frequencies and whatnot to determine what can a deer hear. The problem with that study is that the deer were captive, born and bred by humans. They've never had to survive in the wild. They've never been shot at with an arrow. So their senses have not been honed like the deer in the wild.
It's like genetics may have passed down so much, but it's probably not going to be as fine-tuned. Yeah.
Exactly. So the data that I go off when it comes to what is deer hearing is derived from that study. I would assume if you took a deer from the wild and were able to test their hearing, it would be much more sensitive. But it's a difficult thing to measure because they're not particularly cooperative.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wonder if that would change more as well if like high pressured deer as well, hunting deer, as opposed to deer that aren't pressured much or on private blocks or anything like that.
Definitely. You even see it when you go to a block that's had a lot of hunters on it, right? Because you can just see it's more so the fact that they don't stuff around with noise. They hear the noise and they're out of there. They're like, it's not worth the wait. Let's just go.
Yeah.
There's this one go to that's a paid one, and we can tell like they were closed for 20 years or whatever it was, and he reopened it up and started letting hunters go back in there again. And there's a lot of rifle hunters, and we noticed from our first trip out there to our most recent one, we'd get away with a lot more, and they'd hang around and have a look. But now, as soon as they even see your car coming into the area, they're out of there, not messing around. It's like, it's a game of life and death for them. For us, it's hunting. We're going to go home with families. For them, whether they're going to live to see the next day. So they need to be that wiry, that sensitive to noise.
Yeah, even pigs, I've noticed that on a paid hunting block. And what they were doing is they were just hiding the thickest stuff that they could, because every time they would go onto the crops, they were getting shot by these rifle hunters. So we had to like go into the thickest of thick stuff, which actually laid in our favor a little bit, because what was happening is you would get in the thick stuff and they would think that you were just another one of them. And so you could actually get away with a little bit of noise. But if you were out in the open fields at all and they saw you, they heard you, they got any ounce of you, they were like straight out of there. Yeah, all trained. What other aspects have we not talked about that we should have in regards to either the study or just the noise component side of things, Jamie? Is there anything that you feel like we haven't touched on?
Yeah, so the whole noise side, it made me think about, okay, if we know how loud a fletching is and we know what a deer can hear, theoretically, we can work out at what point is the arrow going to become audible to the deer. So if you work out, so you imagine, as a little illustration, you've got one of those vortex toys, you're at a rock concert and someone pegs it at you from 100 meters. You're not going to hear it until it hits you, because the ambient noise at the time is going to be masking the sound of that thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you flip that scenario and you're shooting you're out there at last light, there's no wind, there's no birds, everything's quiet down, and someone throws one of them at you from 100 meters, there's going to be a point at which it becomes audible. And so you can calculate this like quite simply.
Yeah,
so if you know the sound, if you know how loud something is and you know the distance, you can then calculate how loud it would be at various distances.
Dude, I feel like a boy on Christmas Day. This is like so exciting to hear this.
Yeah, so what I've done is for each of those fletchings, I've made basically a calculator where you put in your ambient noise conditions. So if there's wind in the trees, if there's cicadas, it might be a loud ambient noise. If it's a bit quieter, it might be moderate. And then out in the desert where I did some testing, it was like the quietest background noise I've ever come across, and it was about 9 dB. If you're shooting an animal from far away, it's going to hear it the whole time, because ambient noise is not going to mask the sound of the arrow.
Yeah.
But so basically, if you have the ambient noise at the time, how loud it is, you know how loud it is at 1 meter, then you can predict how loud will it be at 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters, and so on. And at what point does the sound of the arrow go above the ambient noise? And from that point, there's potential that it can be detected by the deer.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, I've done a bit of a calculator, and what I found is that if you're shooting, like I said before, if you're shooting less than 30 meters, doesn't matter if you're shooting the loudest broadhead or the quietest broadhead and fletching configuration. It depends on the background noise, of course. If it's really quiet, doesn't matter what you're shooting, they're going to hear it the whole time. If it's really loud, again, doesn't matter what you're shooting, because they're not going to hear it at all. So it's only when you get
under
out to
30
distance,
meters, you said they will not hear it. essentially.
If there's really loud ambient noise.
Oh,
like
got
if,
you, like
if
cicadas.
there's
Yes.
cicadas,
Yeah.
wind, whatever, they're not going to hear it until it's basically right on them. But if you're shooting 50 meters and you're shooting a quiet arrow setup and you're shooting a really loud arrow setup, that's the difference between it detecting it 30 meters away from impact
Whoa.
or 3 meters away from impact.
No way. That much of a difference. That's wild.
Yeah, massive. So it means that in that time, like in 3 meters, they can drop. They're not, with their reaction time of about 100 milliseconds, they're going to have no time to drop. Whereas if they can hear it from 30 meters away, that gives them a lot of time to hear it, load into their legs.
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, it really depends how far you're shooting.
That's the difference of, I'm pretty sure I remember Matty Moore telling me that they measured a 20-meter shot with an arrow just to see how many claps they could do. And it was, so you think about 30 meters then, that's essentially what, another clap. Yeah. You think about how fast a deer can move in that time. That's a second, maybe 2 seconds at absolute max, second and a half. But that's that's halfway down the field. It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone, yeah. You're essentially saying you can figure out, once you know your arrow setup and broadhead setup and your general ambient noise, you can figure out your effective range, essentially, of what
Basically,
people of shooting.
Yeah, exactly. Or how far the deer can drop for that given situation. It also takes into account arrow speed. Oh no, looks like
no, you're fine. We still got you. Yeah.
It also takes into account arrow speed. So if you're shooting a faster bow, that by the time it hears it, it's going to have less time to react because the arrow is moving quicker. And should I share my screen? Because I've actually got
let me just give you access. I was about to say, is it just one that you've created on your back end or do you have it on website or something like that?
No, just on my back end. I'm going to figure out a way to get it out to people because I think people would like to have a play around with it.
I promise you, if people had access to this, they would nerd out. They would all love it, man. Like,
turn it into an app.
Like I said, when I used to work in a shop with people the questions and the effort people go to actually just build their arrow setup was insane. Like the depth they went to it. So this is unlocking a whole new level to that as well. People would love it.
And so is it only based on the arrow setups that you guys have tested in the Eastern setup, or have you done it like more extensively on top of that? Have you tested easy veins and things like that as well, Jamie?
No, I haven't tested easy veins. I had tested some veins before the Eastern stuff, but it was such a wide range that they tested pretty much everything was included in that test. So yeah, no, I haven't tested easy veins yet. It's definitely on the cards because there's so many Aussie bow hunters seem to shoot them.
We're lazy.
Yeah. It should be called lazy veins.
Yeah.
I think it's because we have access to 24/7, 365 hunting. We shoot so many arrows and so many animals. It does take time if you have to keep refletching your stuff. So I think an easy vein or easy fletch is just such a good thing.
Yeah. But no, I haven't tested those yet. It's just the broadheads. I'm doing another round of broadhead testing and I'm going to be doing another round of some fletches, like the easy veins that weren't included in the Eastern study. So that's to come. And then also just, getting out this calculator because what it does, it actually isolates the sound of the fletching. So you can go through, you choose your fletching, you choose your knock and you choose your broadhead and it creates a composite of the noise profile that those would create, like a theoretical composite.
No way. Yeah.
And I've verified that by shooting all sorts of different combinations and it's accurate to within 1 dB. So like it means you can build an arrow virtually, put in your ambient noise. So if you know there's cicadas or if you know it's quiet, then you choose accordingly. If you're shooting 280 feet per second, you put that in and then it will tell you the worst case scenario. So if a deer was on high alert looking at you, like maybe a doe, how far it could drop. And then there's another category. So if it goes, once it's 3 decibels above the background noise, so I'd say a deer that's not super alert, just your standard level of alertness, that's generally what you'd find how far they could drop. And then there's like a distracted deer, like one that's
feeding
racing or feeding or doing something. And they're more likely to hear it later as the arrows
distracted. Yeah. How about the actual sound of the bow? I know obviously this is a traveling sound that's coming to them, but depending on the sound of the actual bow, some bows are really loud. If you get your bow tuned really nicely, it doesn't make a big noise, is it? And that's kind of it. But some I've heard like every time they release. Does that have it would obviously have an effect. And I guess it depends on that 30 meters and under. It would probably have more of effect than what we're talking about with these longer shots, with these quieter arrows.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So bow noise is another thing that I've investigated. And what I did was actually went to the shoot that Hayden and I met, and I brought all my archery, like my testing equipment, calibrated measurement microphone and whatnot. And I got anyone that wanted to step up to the microphone, and I would make sure they shoot from exactly 1 meter away. So it's apples to apples. And I measured everyone's bows, and I took down their draw weight, draw length, their arrow weight. I had a chronograph there, so I measured their arrow velocity just to look at, okay, we can measure their bow noise. Let's see if there's a correlation between if there's draw length or grains per pound of their arrow weight, if there's any correlation. And there was absolutely none. It was just disappointing. The range that we found between bow noise, the quietest one, we're looking at L peak measurement, so the instantaneous maximum sound pressure level. The quietest one was about 96 dB, and the loudest one was 106 dB. So there's a 10 dB spread there between the quietest and the loudest, which for humans equates to twice as loud. If you heard the quietest bow go off and the loudest bow go off pretty close together, you say, oh, that one's about twice as loud. And basically, the fact there was no correlation between any of the draw length, draw weight, arrow velocity, and noise led me to the conclusion that it really just, like you say, it comes down to bow tune.
Yeah, wow.
If your
What about
cans are
bow
out of time,
brands? Did you notice anything from the different brands you
No.
have there? No. Yeah, wow.
no, some, like you would imagine that people say the Matthews are the quietest, but they were spread in there. There was one that was third quietest, and there was one that was third loudest, and it just comes down to your bow tune, truly.
Yeah. I went to Kev Schilf's butchering course a few years ago, and we had a lineup of 6 of the newest bows from that year, and they were all shooting side by side, and you could just hear like quiet. And the one that was like super loud was actually the Hoyt that year. Like it was compared to the other ones that were in that lineup, and maybe it was just a tuning thing on that bow in particular or something. I don't know. But yeah, everyone was like, wow, that bow is so much louder than any of the others, like audibly for us to be able to hear it. But I don't know if it was actually that loud of a bow. It was just louder than the other bows that were shooting.
Yeah. And then also something that plays into it is some bows have a very distinct snap and it's over. So that's like the decay time. Like it takes some bows, there'll be, like I say, a very tight snap. So the sound is very short. And then you'll have bows that have a long decay time. So it'll be like a more of a twang. It'll ring out longer. That will sound louder than the bow that has the short snap, even though from a measurement perspective, they might be about the same if we're measuring absolute peak. I've actually found that where you put your peep in the string, even though it's not something you should mess with from a sound perspective, can make your string into basically a guitar string. If you put it in a particular spot, it can resonate. So you get a longer decay time of your bow. But so there's just so much that goes into it. It's not something, get your bow in tune, put some dampeners on there, whatever, and just accept it.
What was the actual peep height change? What sort of shape face would you have to have a longer guitar string? Eyes down the face and your mouth or something? Or
the closer the string is, the peep is to the center of the string, the more its effective mass. And so the more it's going to create oscillations in the string. But it also comes down to your draw length, the axle length.
Makes sense.
There's a lot. But in
about the noise out bow. Obviously sound travels at a certain speed. Is the sound of the bow going to overtake the sound of the arrow shooting through the air to get to the deer? Or is that not really a factor because it will, like you said, the decay time over that distance won't matter?
Yeah, so good question. The sound travels in air at about 342 meters a second, or 1,200-ish feet per second. So if you imagine you're shooting at 280 feet per second, your arrow
faster.
It's 4 times faster. So that the sound of the bow and the sound of the arrow is always going to arrive at the target before the arrow or anything else does. So that's why in rifle shooting, because generally shooting faster than the speed of sound, the bullet hits before the sound of the gun. So there's no chance for it to react. Whereas the relative slow speed of an arrow compared to the speed of sound in air means that reaction is a potential.
Interesting. And it'd be interesting to measure at what point the once again, like we were talking to before, the bow sound dampens before it actually affects the distance of the deer. Say, for instance, at 50 meters, do they actually hear it or not? At 60 meters, do they hear it or not? Yeah.
I have looked at that, and what I found is that pretty much under any background noise condition, like even if it's quite loud out with wind, they're pretty much always going to be able to hear the sound of the bow.
Interesting.
So you can't get a bow quiet enough for them not to hear it.
Yeah.
But the fact is that it may be quiet enough that they don't perceive it as a threat, or far enough away that they don't perceive it as a threat.
Could sound like a stick dropping, for instance. Yeah.
Exactly. And that comes down to, if you close your eyes and you got your mate to shoot his bow from various distances away from you, you're going to be able to tell when it's close to you. And there's a few reasons for that. It's how loud it is. And then it's also the frequency content of it. So if it sounds really close to you, the high frequencies are going to be quite strong. But as that sound gets further away, those high pitched sounds actually attenuates in air. And that's the way our brain can go, all right, that sound was slightly quieter and the high frequencies were rolled off. So it's probably further away. And then there's also the aspect of the sound itself actually bounces around the woods, and it gives you like an echo or a reverb. And the further something is away, the more reverb there is going to be on that sound. And it's just another way our brains go, okay, that sounds further away. And it's the same thing for deer. So when you're inside, people often talk about like a radius sort of thing, like a zone for deer. And when you're inside that, the sound of the bow makes them go crazy. And that's just because of the combined how loud the bow is, the frequency content of it, and they can just know based on that, the information in that signal, that this thing is really close. It doesn't matter what it is, I'm going to freak out. So as you get further out, that there seems to be a point at which those high frequencies roll off, the level of the bow attenuates enough, and there's enough echo in the woods to tell the deer, all right, that thing's a bit further away. I don't need to freak out quite as hard. So there's a lot.
That's super interesting. Yeah. In my head right now, I'm going through, well, the benefits of getting close is that your shot is more dialed in. You're less likely to have more of a stuff up in regards to where you're actually aiming and that shot going to where it wants to be, versus the benefits that actually going out further, as long as you've got the correct gear, it's only a benefit if you can actually shoot well. Yeah. But it could have a major benefit to what you're saying, because you cannot get a reaction from the deer at all. But it comes with a lot more discipline on your own behalf as well.
And also the fact that once you get out to that distance, then arrow noise starts to come into play.
Yeah, sorry, I was meaning if you had the arrow tuned to the specificity of what we were talking about before, of like the quietness that you need it to be reacting at 3 meters only.
Yeah. So there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's no like formula to say, oh no, aim this far low under these conditions. It really, the good hunters have it down to intuition, that, you know, how loud it is, how alert the animal is, and how far these things tend to drop depending on how far away you are and the speed of your bow and whatnot.
Yeah.
A calculator's cool and everything, but you're not going to be pulling that out in the woods.
Yeah. Ethically speaking, I'd still go for 20 meter shots or under.
Yeah. I was hoping this whole study thing would be like, all right, choose A plus B equals C. It's going to be simple and ready to go. And the more you go into it, it's all, you got to factor this in, that in, this in as well. If you're feeling good that day, if it's noisy, if that, it's just never ending.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to share your screen share of the calculator?
Oh, it's asking me to restart my
gotcha. The
browser to get the permissions.
Okay. Too much effort. That's all good.
Yeah.
So take us through the factors of it again. You've got ambient sounds in general. So is it loud? Is it medium? Is it quiet? And then you've got vanes that you're using and broadhead that you're using. That's essentially the three components that you're adding up.
Yeah. So ambient noise, the speed of your arrow. So if you're shooting faster, they'll have generally less time to react. And then the combination of your broadhead, your vane, and your knock. If you're shooting a really quiet broadhead but a loud vane, it's going to be a moderately loud setup. If you're shooting a quiet vane but a loud broadhead, again, it's going to be a moderately loud. If you can get those, they have to be both relatively aligned in terms of how much sound they create in order to get the benefits of it. But that being said, generally a quieter setup is a lower profile vane and a smaller fixed blade broadhead. And if you're going for trauma and you need forgiveness in your arrow setup, then it's not something to chase. Like in the Eastern study, the one that had the best lift recovery, the vane, was the Air Razor Talon, and it's a monster of a vane, but it steers broadhead so well. You could shoot any broadhead under the sun, and it should hit with your field points if you can tune your bow.
Yeah, good man.
And yeah, it's always a trade-off. It's always a self-reflection of like, how good of a shooter am I? Can I, like in the heat of the moment, can I keep my good form that I use in practice? And that really should inform your decision as opposed to just chasing what's the quietest setup that I can use. It does take some self-reflection.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's the moral and ethical compass that you need to discover yourself with hunting as well, right? Because there's going to be learning curves. There's going to be parts where you just have to decide, is this where I'm going to shoot from or not? Like, where is my line? Is it 15 meters? Is it 10 meters? Is it 20 meters? Is it 30 meters? What is that line where you can live with yourself no matter what the outcome is? And that's something that probably develops more and more over time as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Major thing. You just got to know your limits. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not what you want, and you want to. I said I'll stick to 30.
The heat of the moment. Yeah.
But just honestly, if like you said, if you can live with yourself with the shot no matter what, then go for it. But if you want to show true discipline and know that, hey, this shot is going to be absolutely spot on at this distance, stick to it for sure.
Yeah.
We've all had those situations where it hasn't gone and it's not a good feeling.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the majority of all of my fastest, best shots, like shot placement in regards to where you wanted it to go on the animal, it's all been under 22 meters. And it's like, it just feels so good when you actually get it done that way. You're like, oh, thank God. The last thing I think anyone wants to, I would say that hunters are actually the most, like, we've got a real love and passion for the animals.
Yeah.
And they don't want to see that side of it. You don't want to see them having to suffer or anything. It's almost like I shot a fallow deer recently. I double lunged it, but it ran for 250 meters. And that was like gut wrenching to me because I'm watching it wind down the hill and run over this paddock. I'm like, oh, I swear that was like a perfect shot. What's going on? It was, once again, 22-meter shot. But it was just the process of what happened from one of the other guys I interviewed about it. It was talking about if the lungs don't collapse and there's enough air inside of the lungs to keep it ballooned out, essentially, or the blood fills up fast enough that it can keep breathing to some degree. And it's not until the air gets through both sides, essentially, or collapses a lung, and that's what would then create the death to happen faster. So essentially, he was saying you could have shot that animal and its lungs could have stayed somewhat inflated and not lost that capacity to be able to breathe to some degree. And that could be the difference from it running, let's say, 40 meters to 250 meters. But yeah, it was just interesting because watching that and in the process, I was like, I was almost gutted. I was like, that should be down. Like, what is going on? And then when I watched it tumble and then topple and they did the little wobbles and stuff, and then it actually fell, I was like, oh, thank God. It was just such a relief.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
You get told that double lungs a lot of the time. People say that they should drop in sight, sort of thing. But that's really interesting to hear that despite double lung, they can still have some capacity to move.
Yeah, I think he called it a double hemoneurothorax or something. I don't know. It was, the anatomy hunter that I interviewed recently. I actually had some people reach out to me who are like essentially surgeons. They're like, I would like to come on and talk about this more with you because the way that it's been explained is not quite correct to what we know within the medical world, essentially. So I'm like, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. Sure. As long as we can all start to try to learn from everything. And like even with the sound part of this, it's just an extra factor that we can all just learn from and make ourselves better hunters in the end of the day.
Definitely. With what you guys have found so far then, what are the changes you're going to do moving forward? And this is an interesting thing that I think we said it online just before. Yeah, we did when we were recording about how I changed from a shield to a rounded vane. And I've noticed a big difference from that. And you also noticed the difference with that, Hayden, in regards to the sound. Have you made any definitive changes to what you're going to be hunting with Jamie or Hayden even moving forward?
Yeah, for me, I switched to the FFP 360 or the DCA Super Saber. Those ones, they just, from the study, they have great lift recovery, low drag, and low noise. So it's like just an all-around good product that performs across the board. So yeah, that's definitely what I'll be using moving forward.
Yeah, and then in regards to Broadhead, does it change your decisions or thought process on any of that?
I was shooting one of the Broadheads that was in the top 3. I just figured rather than change up my setup and try and chase 0.2 dB difference, stick with what I know and what I've got. Yeah. But if I was shooting ones in the top brackets, I'd definitely
Look to
reconsider
change.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. How about you, Hayden? Any differences?
For me, honestly, probably no. The only real difference is I'm already shooting the Zot, just a normal Zot. I use that for pigs and goats mainly. And for deer, I use a tri-Zot anyway. So for the Broadhead, I'm not going to change. I do want to get Jamie some of the easy Fletch that I have. I'm currently shooting a 4mm vein. I'm going to change, a 4mm shaft with the easy Fletch. I am going to change to a 5mm and get an easy Fletch as well. I want to give them to him to see what noise that changes as well. But realistically, with what we now know about the distance and the noise and everything, it's actually changed my effective distance. Like I always thought I'm pretty cool to shoot out to 30, especially on deer. I was like, yeah, this is okay. Realistically now, I'm just going to shorten everything up for myself and just try to stick to the 20. Now knowing that the sound is
Reaction
such a major
process.
factor.
Yeah.
I know, and like you said before, I know those shots that I do at about 20 meters or so. Most of the time, they're good shots and they're good sound look down quickly. So really, it's just changing my effective distance. My setup's probably not going to change that much.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those processes. And it's something that I always come back to in regards to how far down the tinkering rabbit hole do you actually go? Like I've put down lots of animals with the current setup that I have. And so to me, there's not enough pain to say, yeah, I need to drastically change this. Like I need to go and buy those veins that you just talked about, because for right now, I'm like, oh no, like actually, if anything, my process has improved, but I think that comes down to becoming a better hunter, not because of necessarily the gear setup or anything. And I guess it is interesting. I think back to the Americans once again. If you've got one shot, one process that you can do for the 1 year, of course you're going to want to fine tune literally everything that you can. Versus when
those 10 months to tinker and tune.
Exactly, you may as well be involved somehow. Yeah. Versus it's like when you go out hunting and you blow a stalk, you're like, oh, I'll just go and try find another one.
Yeah. Unless you're in a state forest, then that is
gut-wrenching. Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. Jamie, have you done much hunting?
Yeah, at the farm that I live on, there's a lot of foxes.
Yeah.
There's some goats, but occasionally a deer or two, a small group comes through. So I have to be pretty opportunistic about it. I'm not going to go and sit in a tree because I probably won't see one for 2 months. So I just have to spot and stalk. I'll be driving past in the evening and I'm like, holy crap, there's 2 deer on the property.
Yeah.
And then I'll head out and just try my luck at spot and stalk. And I've shot a few that way, but it is hard to get close. It's farmland, so there's not a lot of cover. So that's where I love practicing out to distance.
Yeah.
And getting comfortable shooting 50, 60 meters with broadheads, so that if I can't get to within 20 meters, which I've only ever once been within 20 meters because just where it happened to be there was some cover.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's open. So I'm like crawling through the grass to try and get close enough. And that makes a lot of noise. So yeah, there's limitations on how close I can reasonably get. But with foxes and goats, it's a different story.
Yeah.
I've got more experience with those than shooting deer. I've only shot 3 deer at this point.
Have you noticed seasonally based on when they're on your property versus when they're not at all?
Yeah, they're not here during the rut, interestingly. So I've never actually deer hunted during the rut.
Those all boys that cross over your block then?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix.
Interesting.
But they don't tend to rut here. There's periods around the rut, they do tend to come through here a bit more.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just like a crossing over block essentially for them when they graze and feed through. Did a really good podcast with Grant Rand and Toby Hines, and we talked about that, where the males will go from area to area, and in that process in the lead up to the rut, where they're going from essentially once they've lost their velvet and they're going in to find the matings or the mates that they're going to go for, where they will just essentially travel. I wonder if that's when you're getting a lot of them on your block.
Maybe.
Yeah, interesting. So you're doing a lot of fox whistling then?
Yeah, I've actually found I've had better luck spotting or just sitting in a paddock and actually spotting them first. Because fox whistling, it happens real quick.
Yeah.
They're so sneaky. They can come in at funny, you can spot them and then they can go into a little gully and come up behind you.
Yeah.
So I have found that spotting them and stalking them and then whistling once you know where they are first.
Yeah. Okay.
You get way better success than just whistling and just trying to look 360 degrees and where's it going to come up.
That was actually something, it just reminded me because of my good mate Benny Fenton. He always does fox whistling. He loves it, but he's also a trad shooter, which made me then think about feathers and if that's something that you've gone to test yet or not, or if it's going to put too many holes in the side of shed because you're not consistent enough with a trad bow or one.
Yeah, I'll need to bring someone in for that for sure.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I have measured the effect of arrow speed on noise. And interestingly, what I found is that slower arrows are quieter. They create less drag.
Interesting. Yeah.
People always talk about, oh, how come if arrow noise matters, how come trad guys have been killing deer for hundreds of years? There is the relationship between arrow speed and arrow noise is pretty interesting. You would think shooting a faster arrow be quieter. Sorry, it would be louder, but the arrow would get there quicker. Because of the increase in noise of the arrow, in some instances, it's actually better to be shooting slower. They're going to hear the arrow later because it's quieter in flight. And so that explains why a lot of the trad guys have the success that they do. They're shooting slow arrows, but the slow arrow doesn't create that much noise. So it offsets the fact that it's going slower. So yeah, that's an area like getting some trad guys out here to measure their setups would be pretty cool. But yeah, like you say, I'd need to maybe give a bit more margin for error if the wind.
Unless you can find someone super consistent. Get Ash Brown or Jack Crick. They're both pretty good with a bow.
Okay. Down.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's hilarious. And Hayden, how about you? You've done a fair bit of hunting?
Yes, and I don't know. I definitely have, but also I guess I'm my biggest critic, but I still think I'm very green when it comes to hunting.
So do I. Don't worry. It's good. It's good to be that way, I think, because then you're always, when you're humble, you're willing to learn more, probably.
I'm humble to an extent, don't I? Basically, I did the classic. I went out, bought a bow, shot it a few times, stayed under the bed for ages. And then I actually had a bad experience where I was going out working out very far west, probably about almost near where you went, Jamie. It's about 12 hours from here. And I actually shot a goat and it was a bad shot. And I saw like it wasn't a good ending sort of thing. And I had to do a couple follow-up shots, which then made me go, hey, if I want to do this, I need to do this properly. I need to get a good bow. I need a tuner. I need to train. And it was around the same time your podcast started, actually. So basically, your podcast started and I was like, I need to get serious. End up buying myself a bow. And then I went through the stage of a lot of Sydney to New South Wales hunters probably have the same situation where had no one in my family, no real friends hunted, nothing like that. So I had to turn to state forest. And if you've been out there in state forest, it's a tough game.
Tough going.
Mate, I honestly went out like probably 10 times in a row, like full 8-hour days, like 20 plus kilometer walks, not seeing a thing. Like you'd see maybe some track here, some track there. Just never really saw a thing. And then
it becomes pretty disheartening pretty quickly.
Oh, mate, like I'm surprised I'm still shooting a bow. Like, it's proud of myself. But eventually just met like some good people. And then I got in front of some private property and started getting in front of animals. And and just learning leaps and bounds just every time you go out there. And that's why I say I still feel like I'm very green because I still make a ton of mistakes. And I'm always learning new things. I really try to talk to the older fellas that have been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years because they know so much. But now I'm starting to feel a bit more confident getting out in the field and not just sitting there and second guessing. Like I'm sure everyone does it, but you'll see a deer and you're like, all right, so maybe I go down here, do that. And then you got that person on your shoulder in your head just going, oh no, what if this happens? And you're sitting there and you're wasting time. But now I'm starting to be like, all right, be confident, give it a crack. And there's always going to be another opportunity. So yes, I've done a bit of hunting, but like I said, I still feel very green.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's cool. It's good. I think it's a good mindset to have and keep while you're out hunting. But I also think that second guess is always going to be there. It's the funny thing is also what you just said though, of I'm wasting time. But it's like they don't know you're there, so you're not wasting time. It's funny how we always speed up the process, right? Oh, we got to get there. We got to do it now. Like this is the opportunity. Versus really, you could probably sit and watch it for half an hour as long as the winds are good.
I always think, I've seen the animal in the field. I've got now the timer starts.
Yeah.
Realistically, he's been out there for 4 hours chilling.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. That's literally been so much of what's ruined many of my opportunities for me. Rushing at the end. Yeah.
And the thing is, the clarity that you have, as soon as you ruin a stalk and it's run off, the clarity that you have and going, oh, I did
Yeah,
this,
of
that,
course.
this wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, why didn't I think about this beforehand when my heart was going?
That's hilarious. And tell us about Magnus Clip. You actually sent me out one and I've used it on a few hunts. What I would say is it really depends on your bino harness setup, right? Like if you've got the good bino harness for it, it's like the perfect kit. If your bino harness is not equipped for based on where it clips in and stuff, because obviously it's movable, you can move it to wherever you want it to be. So it's just about figuring out where's the best location to have it to make it suit. What I actually think, and I haven't tried it yet, but because my bino harnesses fold down, it makes it hard to be able to clip onto somewhere. But underneath, it's got a strap where I reckon I might be able to clip it. So instead of having to put it back here, essentially, I might be able to put it underneath. I think that could work well for it. At least I'm actually thinking about updating my bino harness anyway, which I would then adapt for the Magnus Clip. But tell us about it. Tell us what kind of brought it to light.
Essentially was, and also I think you've got one of the prototypes. I'll have to send you one of the new ones. But essentially it was being green, not being confident myself in the field. Like I hate guessing distance, and knowing like the arc of the arrow and like the heaviness of your arrow, obviously that really affects your impact point when you're shooting. So if you're out by 2-3 meters, like that animal, that could make the difference between hitting it or going under its belly or over the top or whatever it is. And so I always, when I get close, I just love to range and know, yep, this is 23 meters, set my sight to that. I have a slider. I set my sight to that and I shoot that. Essentially, what really brought it on was I was out hunting, it was in a valley, and there was a sow coming through with her piglets. And I was in a good position, but she was just feeding up the hill. And like I kept following her up the hill. She didn't spook or anything, but she kept moving and a little bit further away, and I kept ranging. And I just have it hanging by the side because I couldn't put it back into my pouch quietly enough and like without doing too much movement. And I eventually stuffed it up. I dropped it. It was swinging, hit my bow, made a noise, and she ran off. So I was like, dude, it's either learn how to guess a distance and be confident, or there's got to be an easier way. So yeah, I just come up with the idea of a little clip on the side of your bino harness. It's a magnetic. It's got some foam on there to be really silent. So you can put it on and off as many times as you want. You don't make that noise.
Yeah.
The issue with, it's with every bino harness being so different.
I love the concept of it. I think that's just going to be, it's not a fault of what you've designed. It's actually just a fault of the compatibility with a different harness. And I think that's, I don't know. It's not a fault of what you've designed. I think what you've got in the foam in particular, like how you can peel it on, peel it off, like you've got a tapered edge. So essentially you can place it on nicely so it doesn't make a clip or a slap or anything like that. It's a cool concept with what you come up with, definitely.
Originally we had it on like the actual straps. And that was the whole thing. We like, we'll make it this size. We can strap it onto the strap. But then we got 10 different bino harnesses, and they're all different thicknesses, different thicknesses of the actual strap itself and widths and everything. So I just thought the clip going to be the most sort of user-friendly to try to go anywhere. Like I have mine on the side, like you said. I know Grant runs his down low. Some people do still run it up here. It's one of the things where there's so many different things out there. We couldn't really make it usable for everyone, but yeah,
I think I just need to play with mine more. I haven't really. What I actually did was I removed my complete harness, which was my rangefinder harness, thinking that it would just work well enough just for that. But as soon as I was on a stalk, I bumped it against something, and then it was just flopping everywhere. I'm like, okay, I need to think about that again. But yeah, so it's like you need to, it's just an extra functionality piece to have it. I hadn't thought about my backpack at all. That would be good for when you're hunting pigs or something. Definitely, that's an easy fix for now. But yeah,
I'm trying to figure out different ways to make it universal for, like you said, a backpack or different bino harnesses. It's just a matter of getting to that conclusion, because you can make a clip where you could do a nut and bolt system, but realistically, I don't think hunters want to be drilling into their bino harness to make
or anything. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because then resell it in the future and stuff like that. So that was probably the biggest challenge, along with the thicknesses of the foam and the strength of the magnets. Like we went through a lot of iterations, and
those magnets are strong.
Yeah.
That was my concern, that crawling around, crossing under a fence, whatever, that you could just pull off, but that thing does not come off. Like, and using the rolling technique to get it off, like it's so much easier than
that was the hard thing, whether like you go one way or the other, where you've got to make it strong so it doesn't fall off, but then also you got to have the right technique to pull it off at the same time. If it's too weak, you bump it. make noise ruins it. Definitely a balancing point, but yeah, always happy to take criticism and stuff and try to make it a better product.
I think it's just also, it's interesting in my head, always just seeing the process of what it's taken to even get to be able to launch something to market, right?
Yeah.
Everyone just sees a product and they're like, oh, wow, look at this thing. Or, oh, it must be nice. And you're like, oh, well, actually, it took me a fucking year and I do 30 different iterations and it's been a lot of work. And yeah, it's always
I
interesting.
had no idea. Like I've always liked to invent stuff and I've always been handy, like I'm ex-tradie and stuff. But I had no idea. You try one thing and then it creates another problem. Then you got to try to solve that problem. It's a really fun process, honestly. It's good. And it's once you get to the end and you are happy with the product, like it's very satisfying as well.
Definitely. Yeah, it's cool. Where can they get them? Where can people get one or check them out if they want to?
They'll go to MagnusClip. I think it's just magnusclip.com is the website. We also have just MagnusClip Instagram as well. And it's got a link on there. You can just click on there and get one yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then, so all of the data that you guys have done is essentially posted on precisionarchery.com. You can go precisionarchery.com/research. There's a lot of other // that you can do, but I think if you just did research, it'd get you to the first part. Jamie, what about the stuff that you've got going on? Like, obviously, this is something that you're going to continue tinkering and playing with. Is the best place to follow along and see your results through the Instagram page, the archery_sound_lab?
Yep. At this point, the Instagram is the main one. I do have a website on there at the moment. This is like the skeleton of a blog, and I've got the test methodology for how I test arrows. If anyone's interested in like the technical jargon terms that are in there, and then there will be more stuff going into that, including this calculator, which I'm just working on how to get it into my website. But yeah, that's between Instagram and the website. Those will be the main ones.
Yeah, cool. We'll talk offline. I've got some ideas for how you can make it work.
Great.
Sweet. Thanks, boys. I really appreciate this. I think it is very cool just listening to the concepts of A, how it came together, but then B, the actual results. There was actually a lot of learning points that I didn't think were going to come necessarily from it. Like the whole concept of, really, it makes a lot of sense now where you laid it out as sound being math related, and you can literally figure out at what point a deer is going to be able to hear you based on the amount of sound that you're putting out. It's, duh. But at the same time, I hadn't thought of it in that concept necessarily before. I just thought of loud arrow, deer moves, right? Hey, man. But it's cool to actually put some science and math behind it as well, where you can actually go, okay, this actually is really figure outable, where you guys can, tinker some more if it so does your heart in. Yeah.
Yeah, fully.
Yeah. Awesome, boys. Appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Matty.